one of the key things that I want to really press on is discerning the voice of God, right? Because when we talk about, receiving a word, when we talk about obedience, there is no faith without obedience, right? But there is no obedience also without a word. And so how do we discern the voice of God from our own or the voice of the enemy? And just to set the foundation, one of the things that I have just learned with God is if you don't know God's nature, you will not be able to discern his voice, right? Because when you look at, I've always been fascinated with agriculture, and maybe because the Bible is also fascinated with agriculture. And one of the things that really just that intrigues me is you will always know the fruit of you always know what seed was planted in the ground by the fruit of the tree, right? So you never have to do guesswork, because when a seed is planted, it's buried, it's unseen. And so you might enter a field, and that field is full of buried seeds. That field is a forthcoming harvest, but you have no idea of knowing, is this going to be a harvest of apples? Is it going to be a harvest of oranges? Unless the farmer told you, right? And what I love about the idea of the unseen element of a seed is because that's what happens in our thoughts. We don't always see who plants the thought. Right? That's why sometimes, because for example, when people struggle with thoughts of, anxiety, or you're called to do something and then you start feeling like, I'm a failure. This is not going to work. I can't do this. That's not your thought. Because one of the enemy's greatest strategy is to camouflage himself as you. Right? If he can get in your head and give you a narrative and make you believe that you are the one thinking that, then he wins, because he does his best work in darkness. He is the ruler over darkness. And so your mind is a spiritual realm. And there's so much competing for that real estate. That's why a lot of times when you see, the conversation about warfare in the Bible, it talks about the mind. Right? Pulling down, casting down strongholds, right? And bringing every thought into, how many people know the word? Thank you. Thoughts, imaginations. And so why would we have to bring thoughts and imaginations into captivity? Because it's not always from you. God did not create you to be divided with yourself. You are created in the image of God. That means you are created in the image of oneness. You're not created to be divided. Where there is division, that's where the enemy can creep in. Because a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So the enemy recognizes the only way I can find an access if I could divide you from your truth. And so he begins to plant thoughts in your mind. Anytime you have a debilitating thought, you have to cast that down. Because the Bible talks about the spirit of fear, but there's also the emotion of fear. But what I've learned is that the spirit of fear comes where there is agreement with the thoughts that come from the enemy. When you actually come in agreement and you don't cast it down, then you've made room for a spirit to cripple you, right? And so the enemy doesn't hide his nature. The fruit would always reveal the seed. So when you start finding yourself, feeling less than, God will never speak to you that way. Never. God will never tell you you're not good enough. As a matter of fact, he will hype you up, right? He will tell you that you're able, that you can do all things. He will not speak to you in a way that dumbs you down. So now one of the biggest wrestles is the voice of God versus the voice of our emotions. And this is why self-awareness is so important. Because even your emotions can create your dreams. There are scriptures in the Bible that talk about the dreams that you have dreamt. But there's also dreams that can come from the Lord.